Welcome to HD Rare Coins, your ultimate source for rare coins, fascinating history, and the thrill of discovery. From legendary pennies to hidden gems, we explore the world of numismatics one amazing coin at a time. To understand how such an ordinary object could rise to such extraordinary value, we must go back, decades, in fact, to understand the circumstances that birthed this dime. The year was 1980. The United States was undergoing a turbulent transformation. Ronald Reagan was elected president, inflation was surging, and America's economic and political landscape was shifting rapidly. It was a year of uncertainty and ambition. In the midst of this national backdrop, the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia was producing billions of coins, striving to meet the demands of a busy economy and a growing population. The Roosevelt dime had been introduced in 1946, a tribute to the late president who led the country through the Great Depression and World War II. His profile replaced the Mercury dime and became a symbol of strength, resilience, and reform. By 1980, the design had already become familiar: his left-facing portrait, the word "Liberty," the iconic "In God We Trust," and the year of mintage. The reverse carried the torch flanked by an olive branch and an oak branch, symbols of liberty, peace, and strength. But the 1980 P dime had something more, something rare. It was minted in enormous numbers, over 735 million of them to be exact. And yet, within that sea of coins, a tiny handful were different. They were struck with extraordinary precision, exhibiting a level of detail, luster, and sharpness that set them apart from the masses. These coins, designated as full band or full torch dimes by numismatists, showed complete, uninterrupted horizontal lines across the torch's flame. Such coins were rare due to the immense pressure and perfect die alignment required to produce them. Most dimes from circulation were too worn or poorly struck to reveal this level of detail, and so, among hundreds of millions of coins, only a few 1980 P dimes ever achieved this full band status. Even fewer survived in pristine condition, untouched by the ravages of time, weather, or handling. One such coin, preserved in immaculate condition, stood alone, graded at the highest possible level by PCGS as MS-68 full band. It was this very coin that stunned the numismatic community when it sold for an astonishing $107,000 at auction. Not because it was ancient or composed of precious metal, but because of its condition, rarity, and perfection in an otherwise ordinary sea of copper-nickel. To collectors, this wasn't just a coin, it was a unicorn, a ghost, a myth proven real. The 1980 P dime, after all, was never expected to be valuable. It was modern. It was common. It was just a dime. But that's what made it so special. The allure of finding such a treasure in your change jar or tucked away in an old coin purse was irresistible. It reminded the world that greatness can be found in the most unlikely places, that even the smallest, most mundane objects can hide untold value, but the road to such value is not easily traveled. To fetch over $100,000, a coin must not only be rare, it must be flawless. That MS-68 grade meant the coin showed no visible marks under magnification, had perfect luster, and was centered and struck with stunning clarity. Achieving such a grade for a coin meant for everyday commerce is like capturing lightning in a bottle. Most dimes, even straight from the mint, showed nicks, scratches, or weak strikes. But this one? It gleamed with near-perfect symmetry, a snapshot of the mint's peak capabilities. The Philadelphia Mint itself had a reputation for being a workhorse, churning out billions of coins annually, often at the expense of finer quality. So when a coin of this caliber emerged from Philly, it turned heads. Collectors flocked to grading services, poring over their change and coin rolls, hoping to strike silver, or, in this case, copper-nickel gold. And yet, beyond the technicals, beyond the luster and the grading, the story of the 1980 P dime is also a story of human curiosity, passion, and the thrill of discovery. Coin collecting has always been about more than metal. It's about the chase, the connection to history, and the stories embedded in every scratch, every ridge, every mark of age. The Roosevelt Dimes series is still being minted today, but collectors cherish its early years, its varieties, and especially its rare perfection pieces. The $107000 dime is one of these. It speaks not only to the beauty of numismatics but also to the unpredictable nature of value. Who would have thought that a simple coin from the 1980s, a decade most remember for cassette tapes, Rubik's cubes, and shoulder pads, would yield one of the most expensive dimes in modern U.S. history? But that's the beauty of collecting. It transforms the mundane into the magical. It turns change into cherished history. And for those lucky enough to find a rare coin in their possession, it can change lives. As word of the 1980 P dime sale spread, it ignited a firestorm of interest. Coin forums buzzed with speculation. Collectors began re-evaluating their Roosevelt dimes. Stories emerged of people pulling old coin albums from attics, dusty jars from closets, and inspecting every 1980 dime under bright lights, hoping for that telltale full band clarity. Meanwhile, grading companies saw an uptick in submissions. Everyone wanted to know, could their dime be the next $107000 marvel? Could a simple 10-cent piece fund a college education, pay off a mortgage, or buy a dream car? The answer, tantalizingly, was yes, but only if lightning struck twice. As this story ripples through the numismatic world, it underscores a timeless truth: value isn't always where we expect to find it. Sometimes, it's sitting quietly in your pocket, waiting to be seen, recognized, and appreciated for what it truly is. The 1980 P. Roosevelt dime is more than a coin. It's a reminder that even in a world of mass production and digital convenience, the analog beauty of a perfectly struck coin still holds the power to captivate, to surprise, and to inspire. And as we continue this deep dive into the fascinating journey of this coin, from the mint presses of Philadelphia to the display cases of elite collectors, we'll explore its technical nuances, the details that separate the average from the extraordinary, and the market forces that drove a 10-cent piece to six-figure glory. In the heart of Philadelphia, where the hum of machinery never stops, the mint was busy churning out coins by the millions. Amid this industrial ballet of dies and planchets, precision was more a goal than a guarantee. The Roosevelt dime, though a mainstay of U.S. currency, wasn't granted the luxury of slow, meticulous production. These coins were made for circulation, for soda machines and grocery store counters, not velvet-lined cases. And yet, paradoxically, this environment gave birth to a gem, a near-miraculous coin that defied the odds of mass production. To understand how this happened, we have to look closely, very closely, at the process. Every coin begins as a blank disc of metal called a planchet. In the case of the Roosevelt dime, it's a clad composition, an inner core of pure copper, sandwiched between two layers of copper-nickel alloy. This combination gives it strength, durability, and that distinctive silvery sheen. But to strike a coin with pristine details, especially the fine lines on the torch of the reverse, everything has to align perfectly. The dies, the engraved metal tools used to stamp the design onto the blank, must be fresh, unblemished, and well aligned. The planchet must be perfectly flat and clean. The striking pressure must be just right, not too light to blur the features, and not so hard that it distorts the metal. And perhaps most important of all, the coin must avoid the slightest contact with others before being handled and stored. That is a tightrope few coins ever walked. That's why, in the world of Roosevelt dimes, the full bands designation is such a coveted title. These two horizontal bands across the torch, which represent the wrapping around the torch's center shaft, are notoriously delicate. On most coins, they appear as vague impressions, marred by the wear of circulation or the weakness of the strike. But when they are clear, bold, and uninterrupted, when you can see each individual band with full separation, then the coin ascends into a new category of rarity. Now imagine a 1980 P dime, born in an ocean of hundreds of millions, somehow achieving that perfect strike. It slips through the cracks of wear, evades the touch of hands, and eventually finds its way to a professional grading service. There, under high-powered magnification, it is scrutinized. No marks. No abrasions. Full bands visible in razor-sharp relief. It is awarded the elusive MS 68 FB, Mint State 68 full bands, only one such coin is known to exist. Let that sink in. Point 1. It's this uniqueness that makes collectors' hearts race. It's not just about beauty or condition. It's about survival against impossible odds. The 1980 p dime didn't just emerge from the mint, it transcended the very process that was designed to make it ordinary. And in doing so, it became something far more than a simple coin. It became a story. A symbol. A talisman of perfection born from imperfection. In the broader context of numismatics, perfection is always pursued but rarely attained. Collectors know this. That's why coins graded MS-68 or higher often fetch eye-watering sums, because they represent the closest approximation of flawlessness in a world defined by variance and wear. It's why grading agencies like PCGS and NGC have become gatekeepers of value, assigning grades that can turn a $10 coin into a 5-figure trophy, but grades alone don't tell the full story. Provenance matters too. The auction block where the $107,000 dime made headlines wasn't just a transaction, it was a coronation. Bidding wars erupted. Eyes widened. And the year was 1967. Across the United States, the echoes of a rapidly changing society pulsed through every city and town. The Vietnam War was escalating, civil rights protests were intensifying, and American pop culture was transforming almost overnight. The summer of love was beginning to bloom in San Francisco, while the Beatles were reshaping music from across the Atlantic. But in the middle of all this upheaval, a quiet revolution was taking place, one not on the streets or in the headlines, but in the hands of everyday Americans. This was the era of a new kind of dime. A coin that, despite being minted in the millions, would come to embody the subtle intersection of history, craftsmanship, and hidden value. It was in this turbulent year that the U.S. Mint produced the 1967 Roosevelt Dime, a small, silver-toned coin that would slip into the pockets of millions. To the average American, it was just another 10 cents. It bought bubblegum or a newspaper. It slid easily into vending machines and was forgotten as quickly as it was spent. But for numismatists, historians, and collectors alike, this seemingly ordinary coin would one day become an icon of rarity, precision, and unexpected value. You see, 1967 wasn't just any year for American coinage. It marked the second year after a major transformation in U.S. monetary policy. Just 2 years earlier, in 1965, the United States had abandoned the silver standard for most of its circulating coinage. No longer would the dime, quarter, or half-dollar be minted in 90% silver. Instead, they would be clad in layers of copper and nickel, a practical decision in response to rising silver prices and widespread coin hoarding. By 1967, the transition was well underway. The new copper-nickel composition had become the norm. But what many don't realize is that this year was also unique for another reason. In an effort to discourage the hoarding and speculation that had plagued earlier years, the U.S. Mint took the unusual step of removing mint marks from all circulating coins. That meant no small P for Philadelphia, no D for Denver, and no S for San Francisco. Every dime from that year bore only the date, 1967, with no hint of its origin. It was a move intended to discourage collectors from hunting for specific mint variations, but in the end, it only added to the mystique, and so the 1967 Roosevelt dime became a silent traveler, indistinguishable by mint yet part of one of the most curious chapters in American coinage. The design itself remained familiar, Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile facing left, framed by the word liberty and the national motto, "In God We Trust." The reverse featured the same elegant composition introduced in 1946, the torch of liberty flanked by an olive branch for peace and an oak branch for strength. Simple. Elegant. Consistent, but beneath that familiar face, subtle differences emerged. Variations in die wear, strike strength, and planchet quality led to the creation of an elite few, dimes that displayed an extraordinary level of detail and preservation. In particular, those bearing the elusive full bands designation on the torch became prized among collectors. The full bands refer to the sharply defined horizontal lines across the torch, which, when fully visible, signal an unusually strong and precise strike. Achieving this detail requires a perfectly aligned die, a flawless planchet, and optimal pressure, factors rarely achieved in mass production. Out of the tens of millions of 1967 dimes struck, only a tiny fraction show full bands. And of those, an even smaller number have survived the decades in pristine condition, untouched by circulation, preserved with care. Most have long since been lost, worn down in commerce, or melted down. But a few, just a precious few, remain. Among them is one dime that stands apart from all the rest. A single coin, encapsulated in a protective slab by a major grading company, graded MS-68 full bands. That grade, Mint State 68, is nearly the pinnacle of perfection, a level of quality that few coins of any year achieve. For a coin from a year as widely minted and circulated as 1967, it's almost unheard of. Under magnification, this dime reveals every ridge, every subtle curve of Roosevelt's profile, every fine line of the reverse. It gleams with the original luster it carried from the day it left the mint presses. This dime, this one-of-a-kind survivor, sold at auction for an eye-watering $112,000. To understand how a dime worth 10 cents could be valued higher than a luxury car, one must understand the forces at play in the numismatic world. Collectability is driven not just by age, but by rarity, condition, and historical significance. The 1967 dime, while common in circulated form, is astonishingly rare at the highest levels of preservation. This isn't about a coin merely surviving. It's about a coin defying the very odds of its existence, and yet, beyond the numbers and grades lies something even more profound, a story. The story of a coin born in a time of national uncertainty, quietly moving through decades of American life, only to re-emerge as a star. It's a tale of how even the most overlooked things can carry immense value, if only we care to look closely enough. For collectors, this coin is a dream. It represents everything the hobby stands for: the thrill of discovery, the joy of rarity, the beauty of preservation. It's the kind of coin that inspires late-night searches through old jars, forgotten drawers, and inherited albums. It fuels conversations in coin clubs and online forums. It reignites the imagination. The 1967 dimes journey is also a testament to the role of grading companies. Without professional third-party grading, coins like this would remain in obscurity. But when placed in a tamper-proof holder, assigned a grade, and entered into a verified registry, their stories are preserved and their value unlocked. Collectors and investors alike know exactly what they're getting. It's a system that has transformed the coin market and given coins like this a platform to shine. Even today, decades after its release, the 1967 dime remains a source of intrigue. Roll hunters scour bank boxes, hoping to find an uncirculated gem. Estate sales sometimes yield forgotten hoards. And though most will find nothing extraordinary, the dream persists. Because just knowing that a dime can be worth $112,000 changes the way we see our change. It teaches us to pay attention. To look again. To believe that something great could be hidden in plain sight. In the decades that followed its release, the 1967 dime flowed quietly through the arteries of American commerce. It passed from hand to hand, slipped into coin purses, fed into parking meters, dropped into piggy banks, and rattled in soda machines. Most dimes lived their lives this way, serving, circulating, eroding with each transaction. Nobody suspected that some of these coins held the potential to one day command staggering fortunes, but not all coins aged the same. A few managed to escape the cycle of wear. Some found themselves in freshly opened rolls that sat untouched in drawers, safety deposit boxes, or forgotten estate collections. Others were simply lost in the shuffle of life, tucked away in coin albums, saved by children, or hoarded during times of economic anxiety. It was in these hiding places that treasure quietly waited, gathering dust, unnoticed by time. Then came the collectors. In the 1980s and 1990s, coin collecting began to see a resurgence. Fueled by a growing community of enthusiasts, the rise of coin shows, publications, and, eventually, the internet, numismatics began to evolve. What had once been a hobby for retirees and historians suddenly attracted investors, thrill-seekers, and curious minds from all walks of life. And within this growing movement, a new focus began to emerge. Condition was king. Suddenly, it wasn't enough to have a coin from a rare year. The real prize lay in coins that had survived in flawless, untouched condition. Grading companies like PCGS and NGC revolutionized the way coins were assessed, bringing objectivity and trust to a market long ruled by opinion. And in that new landscape, the 1967 dime found a second life. Collectors began to send in rolls and bags of 1967 dimes for grading. Most came back as expected, low mint state grades, touched by bag marks, soft strikes, or faint surface haze. But every once in a while, something astonishing emerged. A coin so crisp, so boldly struck, so perfect in its presentation, that it seemed to defy the very mechanics of mass minting. The most prized among these were designated full bands. These were the elite. The Roosevelt Dimes torch was the ultimate test, its delicate horizontal lines nearly always faded or blurred in circulation. But a full band's designation signified strength, sharpness, and precision. And because 1967 had no mint marks, there was no way to identify where the best strikes came from. It was mystery wrapped in metal. It was from this era of rediscovery that one dime began to draw attention, a coin so extraordinary, so unmarred by time, that even veteran graders paused in admiration. It wasn't just mint state. It wasn't even just full bands. It was MS-68FB, the highest known grade for a 1967 dime, and quite possibly the finest of its kind ever struck. There was no fanfare when it was discovered. It didn't appear on the evening news. There was no red carpet moment. Instead, it sat silently inside its slab, its surface glowing under inspection lights, whispering a story only a trained eye could hear. It was presented at auction with modest expectations. After all, how could a common dime command headlines? But the bidding told a different story. It began slowly, as most auctions do. A few collectors recognized the rarity and jumped in. Then the momentum grew. Veteran dealers, registry-set competitors, and condition rarity investors began to take notice. And then the gloves came off. Phones lit up. Bidders from around the country, and even abroad, began placing offers. The coin wasn't just rare. It was unique. It was, for that year and grade, a population of one. When the final hammer fell, the room was stunned. The price, $112,000. A dime, a coin minted by the tens of millions, a coin that weighed just 2.27 grams, a coin that most Americans had never really looked at, had shattered expectations and entered the realm of legends. And with that, the 1967 Roosevelt dime earned its place in numismatic history, but perhaps even more compelling than the coin itself is the ripple it created. The sale set off a wave of curiosity and excitement. Collectors began to revisit their albums. Dealers re-examined their stock. Coin enthusiasts who had dismissed modern coins began to reconsider. The message was clear: hidden value didn't always come from ancient coins or early American rarities. Sometimes, it came from the change in your pocket. People began to hunt again. They searched bank rolls, attended estate sales, explored flea markets and thrift shops, hoping lightning might strike twice. New collectors were born. People who had never thought twice about dimes before now found themselves mesmerized by magnifiers, learning to recognize strike sharpness, luster, and die polish lines. Coin forums buzzed with shared finds and hopeful speculation. The 1967 dime had rekindled something vital in the community, the joy of discovery, and this is what makes numismatics magical. Coins are time travelers. They connect us to specific years, to moments, to choices made in secret corners of history. The 1967 dime, now known to many simply as the one, wasn't just metal. It was a mirror to the past, a symbol of survival, and proof that even the most ordinary things can hold extraordinary value, when preserved, when examined, when understood. That dime, once forgotten, now lives on not just in a plastic slab or an auction catalog, but in the stories told by collectors. It serves as a reminder that every coin has a journey, and some journeys end in glory, and while most 1967 dimes will never leave their worn state, while most will remain what they were always meant to be, currency, somewhere out there, another one may yet surface. Another untouched, unblemished, perfect strike. Waiting. Watching.